Are you tired of being in the spiritual closet at work as a corporate leader? This is the $1,000,000 question. If you're like me, again, my guess is somewhere your answer is along the lines of yes, which means in your personal life, you have a spiritual practice, whatever that means for you. When I say spiritual, all I mean is something that feels beyond meaning of yourself. So that could be religion, but it might also just be meditation. It might be uh energy healing. It might be like Reiki. It might be therapy. It could be prayer. It could be, it could be so many things. But I think there's this barrier in the corporate world about spirituality. So we have hesitancy to bring it into the workplace for the most part. And I think there are exceptions to this for sure. I am thinking of one friend of mine who they literally pray before every meeting and ask for the highest good to go for it. And I love that, right? But like that's probably not the norm. So what are we doing? How do we take ourselves out of that spiritual closet, whether it's the workplace or anywhere else, really? But I think today we'll focus on the workplace because it's just not something we do right now and talk about. But if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, that's totally me. I feel like I'm very spiritual, but I'm not really showing that side of myself at work, then congratulations, you're ahead of the curve. That's all I have to say, because I think it's coming. I think the world of corporate environment is in service of needing bigger purpose and support along those lines. And I think it will be us who helps with that, whether it's our own knowledge and experience being on that side of entrusting the highest good, or knowing there's spiritual plays out there, meaning, there might be angels you talk to, there might be prayers and different gods that you pray to, and maybe it's just the God or Jesus or whatever it is. But all of this is simply, I would say, a clue to know that you are able to bring this to work. But here's the thing: how do we do this, right? We're all wondering, well, what could I do differently? And then I think because we're not authentic, maybe that's truly a part of who you are, but you don't feel like you could share that at work, then we start to feel burned out, right? Because that's inauthentic, is when we hide parts of ourselves, and we know that might be really part of it. And I think there's many parallels to this, right? If we're talking about anything at work, bring our whole selves to work, and we are unable to do so, whether it's our gender, our sexual orientation, spirituality, religion, like anything, then we don't feel safe. We don't feel like that's a good place to be. And then we end up feeling stressed about it because it's not okay. We want to be fully accepted. And when we're not, then it's a threat, really. So today we'll keep the focus on the spiritual closet, but I think that it kind of relates in this bigger sense too, just kind of naming that as well. And I'll share my story. If you haven't heard my story before, I'll share it in a little different way today, in that I burned out of Google. So this was in 2011, and I wouldn't really consider myself I wasn't spiritual too much. I mean, I kind of believed in God, but I don't know. I didn't really have any practices around it too much. And then I had this burnout where I took this break and I was stressed, and I realized I wasn't present. I was kind of in my head a lot. I was blaming myself and being super critical. And that just wasn't serving me, right? That was me self-sabotaging and being brutally mean to myself. And I started studying emotional intelligence soon after that break. I went to Burning Man that year, first time, and stayed at a meditation camp, which was pretty spiritual, right? Meditation, where you're accessing your higher self, or a realm where you're not typically in consciously. This was all really new to me. So I came back from all that, got a new role at Google. I did decide to go back. And what I realized was this big epiphany I had at the end of Burning Man, which was I didn't need to put myself in a box. I didn't need to conform in ways that I was used to, right? Meaning the work world, going into my 9-to-5 job and doing things like I could quit and be a metal worker if I wanted to. It was kind of what I got out of my Burning Man experience. And then I started to meditate, and the meditation really opened my eyes to know there's a whole universe happening within me that I don't really typically think about, but this meditation, I knew there was something to it and that I was accessing this for the first time. So my guess is if you're a meditator or you do things that allow your spiritual practices to happen, you are on the path for allowing that to emerge more in your life. And I think this has been a theme my whole time since my burnout. So that was 2011, that was 13 years ago. And since then, I would say, I did have a spiritual awakening. I definitely feel like I went through some access of, some doors in my life where I can't go back through it, where I felt like I had ways of seeing the world and being in the world that were different than the ways I had been prior to my burnout, prior to the meditation, really. And so to me, there's no question that I want to bring this into the world of corporate, which is part of this whole process of the Pausecast and me writing the book Pause. It's for corporate leaders, but it's really to be more self-aware. And it's all in service to, I would say, the spiritual path that I'm on, which is to help be an agent of change so that people understand that they can be in service to their doing, which is going to access and allow you to access so much more of what you're capable of. And that's why it's such a powerful message for me. And then when I went back to work, I was like, how the heck do I share this? Like, how the heck do I make this something that will be helpful for people to also get to understand in their language, right? And I think you all know this potentially, right? Like if we go in and start talking about chakras or like the angels, like that just doesn't fly for most of us. I know it wouldn't have flown for me. And I didn't really want to do that because it didn't make sense to people. But here's the thing. I think what's important is to know, first of all, assess where you are in that spiritual closet, right? So are you in the closet? Are you like 1 foot out of the closet? Do you feel like you have sayings? And I think as long as you speak the language of wherever you are in the world of work, then you're good. You're not in that closet anymore. And I think the more in touch you get with your own belief systems and what matters to you and how you want to be in the world, then we can bring that into the workplace. And there will be a time, this is just my prediction, but there will be a place and a time where work is very spiritual. It's actually the center of what is at work. And that might not be in my lifetime, but that's what we're going for, because there's a gap right now. And this is in general, right? There might be plenty of organizations that are now aligned and feel like that's spiritual, especially things like clergies, right? Or churches, like they're like synagogues, they're all going to have that flavor. But I'm talking about just the corporate world, right? Where you're maybe a Fortune 500 company or a private small startup, right? Like these are things that, to me, spiritual isn't religion. And I think that's the key. It's not about forcing religion on anyone. That's not at all what I'm speaking about. What I'm speaking about is this meaning beyond yourself that is feeling purposeful, right? Which might just mean knowing I can set an intention before a meeting and wish everyone in the meeting like positive intent before we begin, holding them as whole and complete. Like that's a spiritual practice, in my opinion, right? And so that's all we're talking about here. But if you're feeling like that part of you is not able to come out at work, what could you do now, like just today, that would feel safe for you at work? It might be leading 2-minute meditation before your group meeting, and maybe it's just for yourself. Those are some things that I did that really served, I think, me and others on my team and that kind of thing, because I felt like that was helpful. And that was, I didn't call it spiritual at all. It was just it was like a mindful minute before the meeting. But in my mind, I knew it was a spiritual practice for me. And that's what I brought. So it's all about each other, like individuals and ourselves, of what feels meaningful for you on that spiritual side. And are you practicing that in some way at work, which might just mean sharing more of you. It might mean knowing that there's a reason why you're still at this company, or that you're still there because you're helping people learn what it is that is meaning beyond themselves in whatever they are working on and focused on right now. Yeah. So this one is an interesting topic. I think there's a lot of controversy around this one, right? Like spiritual closet at work. Like, what does that even mean? Right. Because a lot of times we're not even thinking along the lines of spirituality and work. But the reality is, if you're a spiritual person, can you bring that part of you to work? And how do I bring that part of me so that I'm feeling like I'm doing what I can that feels purposeful for me, or that feels like it's happening, and that can be great. And so anyway, that's a little bit about the spiritual closet. I'm curious, what have you done? If you felt like you've come out of the spiritual closet at work, what was that for you? Maybe you outed yourself and you said, you know what, I have angels all around me all the time. I don't know. For me, it was just leading things in the language of people, what they understood, right? So it was like having the mindful minutes. I did coaching there, volunteering as a coach. That to me was a spiritual practice. I mean, everything's a spiritual practice if you really think about it, if that's where you're oriented from anyway, right? So it's like creating relationships. That's a spiritual practice. You can pray before a meeting. You can ask for service from your angels from a meeting. Like, all of this is awesome spiritual practice. And you don't need to tell a soul that you're doing that if you don't feel like that would work. Totally okay. But you can practice it yourself. And maybe you tell someone in your family or your life that that's what you're doing. Like, that would be coming out of the spiritual closet, right? It's kind of just owning where you're at, putting a stake in the ground and saying, yep, guess what? Shocker, I'm spiritual and here's what I'm doing. But again, it's all about you, what works for you. That's what a pause is. It's an intentional shift in behavior and can work for you. Well, I hope you enjoyed this short and sweet episode, and let me know what you think. This is a new topic for me to talk about here, and I'm happy to go into more details, whatever works, but I would love to have some feedback on it so that I don't waste your time, or I go into more details if that's something that you're interested in. All right. And wishing you all the best out there in the world of leadership, knowing that you are a spiritual being. Your, as I just cited from another podcast, your purpose is showing your soul gifts with the world. If I don't know what spiritual closet is, then if that isn't it, then I don't know what it is. Because our soul gifts are what we bring every day in our life all the time. It's just about thinking about it, in this world of the corporate setting. And I think they can go hand in hand. It's just a matter of giving yourself permission to be in that space as you are a corporate leader.